Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Look, we have an interesting lineup today. For those who don't know me, my name is Valentine, and this is our Community Monthly show. It's really our space to comment and discuss the ever-evolving world of social innovation and social impact. Today, we'll talk about women in leadership, and to get as much perspective on the topic as possible, we surrounded ourselves with a quite interesting panel, as I said. So first, we have Eleanor Durocher Bergeron, who joined us. Little snippet. I already collaborated with Eleanor as a coach previously, so we have to give that disclosure for sure. We also have Shelly Cano Kurtz. We have Timothy Pereira and Paul Arkan. In a sec, I'll tell you which one of every single one of those guests is doing professionally. I'll let them introduce. But first, I have to specify something. This is an open dialogue. It's an informal discussion about trends that we're seeing, and we want you to be a part of that dialogue. An interesting context. I'll find the right word. The interesting way we do this show is that we keep an eye on all those comments on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube even. So that means if you want to participate, if you have your own questions and you want to get the perspective from our guests, don't be shy. Just add them in the comments and we'll actually see them live. We can pull them up live in the chat, from the chat to the video, and get an answer within minutes. Of course, our guests, you can use the chat, and if we cannot answer during the show, we can always keep an eye on that chat and answer afterwards. So we make this whole concept of a show for the community to bring the conversation further. Feel free to participate. It always leads to some very interesting moments. So let's get started, shall we? So first, Eleanor, and then Shelly, Paul, and Timothy. Hi, everyone. How are you doing?
Hey.
Hi, everyone.
Fantastic. I'm trying a shorter intro. We usually spend like a minute and a half introducing all the order of business. I'd like each one of you to take a bit of time explaining what you do in, let's say, 240 characters, something short, because I have a ton of questions for you. I must admit, our team went a bit overboard here. I think we have content for 2 episodes. So I'll try to find a sweet spot between all those questions and also just have a bit of a breather for us to enjoy the discussion. I will start with you, Eleanor, because you're exactly on my right here. Can you introduce yourself, or how do you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. So I'm Eleanor, and I'm working as an executive coach. And I've been working for the past 12 years in the social economy sector. Now I empower social impact leaders, and more especially, I work with managers to develop what I call their daring leadership, their inclusive leadership in the social economy sectors. Is it a good summary?
It's good. I'm definitely curious to know more. Then let's go with Shelly. Shelly, how do you usually present yourself?
Hi. Well, it depends where I'm at. Last night for St. Patrick's Day, it was a little different than today. But we have created X for Impact, which is a social innovation platform, as a free resource for people to find these social innovations. And so we have a collection now of over 2,500 social tech companies. And you can find them even by women leadership and some of those other characteristics. But we're also the leading data intelligence source for the nonprofit and social impact fields in the US. And we're excited to talk today.
Fantastic. I must admit, I've been a few times on that site. It is overwhelming in a good way. There's no way you can go on that site and come back empty-handed. You're doing something horribly wrong. There's a lot of content there. Thank you. Then we'll go with Timothy. Timothy, how do you usually present yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, great to be here. Thanks for having me on. So at AI Launch Lab, we're focused on training people to get involved in AI. I guess we use normally nicer words, cultivating and enabling, the next generation of AI talent. And we have a large focus on prioritizing diversity and underrepresented groups in tech. And I'm a program director and co-founder there.
Fantastic. As you can guess, Timothy comes from the startup and more the tech background, and I thought it would be amazing to have your perspective at Timothy, what you've seen, for example, at Concordia as you were mounting your various projects there, up to what you see these days, the way the industry is moving forward within. And ultimately, we also have Paul. Paul, how do you usually present yourself?
Hi, I'm Paul, the CEO of Bain Public. We're a product management organization. We actually help hire, identify, implement product management into most startups and SMBs. Tech companies tend to be very male focused, I would say, especially on the engineering front. So, by working alongside organization and their leaderships, we try to make sure that at least the product management function is basically fueled by the right people and without with a pretty much solid emphasis towards establishing leadership through women there.
Yeah, and actually, I still remember a few years ago when we met, the way I asked, of course, why Bain Public, and my recollection of that discussion is you talked about the importance of having a good hygiene, almost in a social space. And there's something that I think rings true in the name and your obsessions with this company, and also why I wanted to have your perspective on it. It was important. We actually had that internal discussion within our team, saying like, "Hey, we're doing a panel about women in leadership. Should all the panel be only?" Only have women in it. And what I've seen in my experience, and tell me if I'm wrong, now is a good time, is that every time we have a discussion about a very specific topic, the most interesting, the most insightful discussion I had, that doesn't go into people that already agree on the exact same thing, so it's just reinforcing what everybody knows, is when people come from various perspectives, because they can kind of share their perspective and compare. And I think this is why I wanted such a broad array of experiences here. And I'll actually launch you with the first question that our team cooked up for the show is, I'll be curious, and hey, we have a camera here, so if you want to talk first, raise your hand. There's no specific order. What is your style of leadership? And how is it different, let's say, from the environment around you and what you usually see? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. I like to call myself Team Mom for our company. I'm the co-founder and the chief marketing officer for the outside world. But on our Slack channel, I'm Team Mom. And I feel like if any of you played sports when you were little, the Team Mom is the one to really sort of make sure everyone has Band-Aids and orange slices, but also is sort of that chief cheerleader. And I think that there's something about recognizing that sort of nurturing, sort of motherly love that is sometimes, tough but necessary, and when someone really needs a Band-Aid. And so I think, my style is a little bit more personal, a little bit more empathetic, perhaps, than a traditional co-founder. And I had someone from our senior leadership team many years ago who came in and said, I really want to talk to you about your personal brand. I don't think that it plays well that you call yourself Team Mom. I don't know if the team, really will see you as perhaps, sort of self-deprecating. And I thought there's nothing deprecating about being a Team Mom. And, sometimes it's that secret sauce. You can have the coaching, you can have, the players, but that support system and that infrastructure and creating culture is something that is very different than just having a strategy.
I love that. I feel that, spoiler alert, I feel that the whole idea of that personal vision of what you care about and what your organization, because everybody around the table here founded their own organization, at some point it's really hard to dissociate both. Or is it? I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit more. Who wants to go next? What is your leadership style versus your environment, let's say, or versus what you see around you?
I mean, I'll continue that. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
go ahead.
about my leadership style. I think it's something I struggle with and try to make better. But it's, you know, in my field, I always find that empathy is and you know, empathetic IQ is quite important, especially when you're dealing with startup leaders, founders who are opinionated, have their own ideas of how things should be, and you know, you're cast in a role where you're supposed to be influencing them and almost suggesting the company where to try new things out. Oftentimes, these founders get empowered by VCs with lots of money, and that basically makes them perhaps believe that, you know, they know that's the right direction. So, empathy is hard. Applying it is hard. Applying it in a you know, pressure cooker situation is even harder. I think that if you need to listen twice as more than you talk, that's the recipe. If I could put it in an equation, but applying it is hard. So I feel that if as a leader we can all become a little bit more empathetic and use that towards our advantage in order to steer, you know, and influence, that's the best way to go. It's very hard to do though.
Oh yeah. It's all about that range. I'm curious, Tim. You're also in the IT sector, definitely working on AI. You know, unsurprisingly, what's your leadership style and versus those of your peers, for example? Versus might not be the best choice of word, but I mean, compared to what you see around you.
Yeah, well, I think my leadership style is a little bit specific because my background is finance and working in AI. I bring maybe some things to the table, and then as soon as we get really to the substantial act of working on projects, then I just kind of let everyone take over. So I see my leadership style as more, I know buzzwords are annoying, but enabling the team. So trying to attract the right kind of talent that we need, and then doing everything possible so that they can succeed, and then letting them do it, which has been challenging for me because in the past, I've been more of a controlling person. So it's been a challenge to let go.
I love that. We're a few minutes in and you already kind of hear those ideas. Like, this is what I like, this is where I tend to, and this is kind of the struggle or the range I'm trying to have, because ultimately that's what we all see, right? There's different circumstances in the environments, and you have to adapt, and how much do you need to adapt versus staying true to yourself? Shelly, that was a beautiful example that you gave there. Eleanor, how about you?
I'd like to say that my leadership is creative and inclusive. And it's interesting because the style of leadership I used to embody is usually more seen, I think, in the non-for-profit sectors. You know, it's usually more associated to women managers in the non-for-profit sector, but I worked previously in the tech field. And what I noticed is that it's a field where you need to have creative people creating, and for that you need psychological safety. So it's basically linked to inclusivity too, which means that I'm a little like Shelly, but I would say that I like to understand my team, understand people, their motivation really deeply in order to see their potential, build it, and also be brave about what is tolerated, what is not around inclusivity and inclusive comportment and bias too, to build the psychological safety. So I would say, yeah, a daring, brave, and creative leadership that is linked to celebrate the diversity and creativity and diverse point of view in the team.
Fantastic. So I didn't plan to answer this question, because as the person who asked the question, I get to play an objective role if I want to, but I'll play along on this one. I think that will make sense of a few things. So for me, I usually tend to go towards what is usually classified as a fairly democratic type of leadership. And there's other types of leadership. You can be, as we said, a bit more assertive, and that has its place, especially when you start a team, right? And some people are really good at that part. But as you grow the team, as the team gets more comfortable with each other, the range and changes. So as a leader, you have to know what's your preferred range and what is the range that is required by the team, and how you're willing to play along that. My follow-up question kind of follows that. Well, it's a follow-up. And I'm curious, when you began your career many, many years ago, many moons ago, did you ever imagine that you'll have this current leadership role in your organization, that you will be that person? What changed?
Okay, well, obviously, I'm the first to jump in again, so we'll have to change that. It's maybe saying something about my leadership style that I'll go first so that other people have time to think about what they want to say. But, I would say that growing up, I always took on a lot of different kinds of leadership roles, whether it was in student government or, different kind of opportunities to lead. So I wouldn't say that it was, not something I saw, but I will say the reason I am leading an organization today is because my co-founder, a man, believed in me and saw me to be someone that he wanted to start a company with, when I never saw that for myself. This was not in my pathway. And so I think as we talk about women in leadership, it's really important, especially today, to talk about male allyship and the fact that sometimes women don't see in themselves what someone else could see or what the world may see, because we don't have a lot of role models that have necessarily come before us in some of these fields that have tended to be more male dominated, like starting a tech company. And so I would say specifically that opportunity to collaborate and to find a partner, I think helps sometimes some women, certainly myself, have more confidence to step in without feeling that kind of imposter syndrome. So love to hear everyone else's thoughts. I think it's so interesting to hear people's career path. But if someone would have told me even 5-6 years ago that I would have founded multiple, tech startups, I would not have believed them.
Fantastic. Actually, this bundles really well the next question I was about to ask. So let me add this to the combo, and we can play along, because that is true, and I've seen that a lot, where our own path is definitely influenced by the people around us. So I'll continue with that question with adding this element: not only how you begin your career, and if you ever imagine that you have the leadership role that you have today, but who are the people, the allies around you that kind of unlock something that you did not know you have. I think those two questions, Shadi, makes a lot of sense together, because credit, where credit's due. Who wants to go next?
I can go. So I think my becoming a quote unquote leader is largely due to the fact that at some point I transitioned from being the youngest person in the room to the oldest person in the room, even though I might not look that old, which maybe speaks a bit to the lack of diversity in tech from an age perspective. But I remember being in school and getting involved in projects, and kind of AI Launch Lab comes out of an initiative at Concordia. I was 10 years older than everyone else, so it kind of made sense for me to fall into that role.
Yeah, I guess I'll take a stab at it from the opposite side. I think you have to learn from your mistakes, and like just being who I am, I basically realized I just kind of like always gotten opportunities to lead in male-dominated environments where diversity wasn't really inclusive. Just happens to be that way. I studied in Italy. It's very, very male-dominated. And I could tell you that, once you come into environments where you are, you have this diversity, you're going to make mistakes. It's just the way we're wired in some ways. But the key isn't making the mistake. The key is learning from your mistakes and creating. And it's funny that Shelley, you mentioned that a man believed in you, and I have 2 daughters, and I always think of it that way. And I'm like, somebody has to believe in you. It's not about your gender or anything like that. It's really about someone believing in someone else's capability, no matter what they are. And I think that, the key learnings for me is that no matter who you are, there's always that diamond in the rough, and it's just about like confidence. Like, I believe in you, and I know you can do this. And do you want to do this? And if somebody's willing to come on board, then let's do it. So if my leadership has changed, it's just been on like just asking the person if they want to do it. Then they're on board, and they're going to get all of my my expertise, as well as my ability to really help them out, and really be it's funny you're using the term I guess mom, was it? How was it? What was the term, Shelley?
Team mom.
Yeah. So I mean, I can kind of say, yeah, I can be team dad too, right? But it's important, right? Like you want to tell everyone, like, I believe in you, and sometimes I often find that, like, it's like there is a element of lack of confidence that you want to basically just push out and say, no, it's not. It's not that way. You might perceive it that way, but it's actually not true. And just push them along. I think that's important.
Fantastic. Eleanor will go next, and then we'll jump on the question of two audience member actually ask a question that we can pack together, because it will follow up nicely what I think you will say. Let's go.
Yes, I was about to jump to say that, 10 years ago, I would have think that I could be where I am now, because I was evolving, first in the corporate world, and then I worked in the government. So even if I was, supported in my leadership, I always felt, that being true to myself was a little bit aside of what was what required from this kind of environment. So if I'm where I am right now, it's really thanks to Ally, yes, but also to the organizational culture in which I succeeded to evolve after that, more in the social economy sector, international development sector, where there is already like a culture supporting women leadership, inclusive leadership, creativity, leadership around emotion. So this is what really helped me to gain some confidence and stand out.
That's a really good point, Eleanor. I just wanted to mention that, we've probably all seen this in our careers, that you can be the same person, the same level of work ethic and competency, and be treated by one organization or one boss as if you're not capable of sweeping the floor, and someone else is ready to sort of, start your presidential campaign. So I think having that culture that feels that, you are empowered, that you are supported, that you can achieve, is something that is important for young people, I think, especially to realize that it's not you. Sometimes it's you, but if you feel that, it just may be that your gifts are better served somewhere else. And there's a phrase that I have used over the years when I have unfortunately had to let people go. And we really talk about it in a way that is focusing on a concept of ikigai. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that word, but it's a Japanese word that means your reason for being, your reason for waking up every day. And it's the answer to the 4 questions. What am I good at? What do I love? What does the world need, and how can I get paid for it? And so when people are not living in their ikigai, you can feel it, right? They're not great at what they're doing, or they come in with an attitude that, as a leader, they don't love it. So it's not a good fit. The output is not what the company needs. And so in those conversations, I've come to say, I'm going to give you the opportunity to succeed somewhere else. And I have found that to be a really powerful connection point with those employees that have actually turned out to be wonderful advocates over the years. They still see me as a mentor. We have a relationship in a way that most people that have had to let someone go do not necessarily have that rapport. And it's because you can see someone when their light is dimmed, and you can see them in a completely different environment when they are their best selves. And so I would just sort of leave that out there as well.
Valentin, I know you said it was the last part, but I just want to jump on something important Shelley just mentioned, and it's linked to women leadership too, because noticing, the ikigai of your employee require compassion, a coaching approach that is basically linked to women leadership typical traits. But when you do that, it's proven that it increases performance because your employee, your team will be more engaged because the basic human needs at work to be fully happy is autonomy, sense of belonging, and sense of competency. And in order to be fully on your hicks, there is a need for someone to see you fully too. So it's really important to engage in this kind of conversation just to increase performance and employee engagement.
On that,
Actually
I'll
speak.
add that 90% of it is really comes down to the culture, right? Choose the right culture. And oftentimes process leads to culture. And I think everybody needs to really evaluate like what processes is this company using that leads to the culture that it has. And if these processes fit the way I want to basically be empowered. And oftentimes it's up to the leader to basically create the right processes for that culture to exist. And but it's okay to actually even question yourself, like, do I fit here? Is this culture right for me? And are these processes really helping me? Because I think that if you find yourself in the wrong place, as you mentioned it, Shelley, it's easier for you to make that decision rather than having them make that decision for you.
I like that approach of perspective. It's if you go from one field to another, you can see the difference, of the value system, your approach to it. Think about Timothy here, who comes from finance, goes to IT. When you see differences is one thing. I weirdly enough come from the world of communication. For example, in school, most of the students were women, and then in professionally starts shifting, but still dominantly women. When I switched to IT, the difference is visible. The approach, the creative side. Suddenly, those differences make you question yourself. And the next, it goes. It follows up nicely a question from Heather. Dennis, if you can pull it up, and she asks, security and feeling valued and included are important. How do you make sure your team feels this on a regular basis? So regardless of where you're from as a background, of course, if you're going from finance to IT, you'll have an adjustment. But just because you're a woman and you join, let's say, a male-dominated space, you'll probably have to you'll consider that. How do you make sure you have this nice environment where you can grow? Any advices that we can share here?
The only thing I'd say, if you're not doing regular one-on-ones with your employees, then there is never going to be any security or the feeling of being valued. It's at some point it's about having one-on-ones and getting constructive criticism or approval, right? And I think that it can't be done in an environment where people aren't taking the time to really get to know you. So any leader for a company, if it's a company of 1,000 plus, I get it's going to be hard to meet with the CEO, but if it's smaller than that, the CEO should definitely put some time, or managers and directors put some time to get to know their employees and really empowering them and really understanding their issues, asking the tough questions, the what and how questions, to really understand what's causing the insecurities and the feeling undervalued and how can that be improved. And just doing something about it. But if you feel like you're just being left alone, never really getting a chance to talk to anyone, maybe there is a lack of culture in that company, or a lack of process that leads to that culture.
Interesting. So one-on-one, and regardless of the size of the organization, you can always kind of build up structures to accommodate for that. I don't know.
I think as a leader,
I was sensing you.
Well, yeah, before you jump in, I think as a leader, you got to carve out some time for the organization to do one-on-ones. Let it be on Friday afternoons or whatever. It's important to first you do it as a CEO, but also you have to ask your VPs and your directors to also do it to the managers and the managers to the employees.
That's an interesting shift where you have to say, and we've seen that with scaling startups. At some point, you have to stop managing the company. You have to start leading your employees and kind of spend more time with them, because they'll do nicer things than you will ever have time to. I don't know.
I was about to say that I think that there is 3 level of things we can do. What Paul mentioned is about the process. The internal process is the reflection of our thoughts and belief as a manager, as a leader, and also as an organization. And there is some, well, inclusive traits that a leader can have, such as humility, visible engagement toward inclusivity, for example, curiosity toward people. But moreover, I think that making your team feel valued and included is linked to your day-to-day comportment. And for me, I would say that, well, showing up, just showing up, being there, stating the importance that psychological safety has, inclusivity, calling out discrimination, for example, like openly, is showing up. Asking for help, being vulnerable and asking for help as a manager, as a leader. Well, 10 years ago, it wasn't, encouraged, but just by doing that, you build also safety by demonstrating to your team that you're a human too, and everybody can be a human in the team. I think also that managing commitment to self and others increase psychological safety in the team. Showing that you don't necessarily overcommit yourself is encouraging also other people to do so, and showing some flexibility, showing that you take care of yourself and you encourage other people to take care of themselves too. Another comportment that I think that is helping to build that safety is really to encourage the development of emotional literacy. I hope it's the good translation from French to English. But as a leader, when you show that you are aware of your emotion and how they affect you, that you are aware also how it affects others, when you speak openly about that, you encourage other people to do so. And this is when true authenticity and vulnerability is built among a team, I think.
That's true. It's funny because 50% of your time as a manager should be about managing yourself, right? So your temperament, your integrity, your character, your ethics, your knowledge, your wisdom, your words that you use. And if you don't do that, like like as a leader, for example, if I go to an event, I'll try to leave by 9:00, 9:30. It sounds pretty ugly, right? Like why would I leave? But I need to rest, I need to sleep, I need to wake up the next day, and I have a whole team to manage. And if I'm angry because I just stayed up too late and had a few pints, and that basically ends up having an impact on how I basically manage a conversation, and my actions basically negatively impact the situation, then I fail to manage myself. So and it's really comes down to how much time you spend on these things. I think 50% seems a lot, but that is basically the amount you need to spend on it.
It's quite interesting because, Eleanor, you talked about a very interesting framework to say, hey, account for those things. And ultimately, to support that framework, you also need to make sure that if you're burned out as a leader, you're not going to be able to implement that. For those who are consulting, nobody wants to spend more time creating very interesting structures that the organization just has no ability to sustain. And if an organization doesn't have the capacity to sustain those nice practices, maybe you as a leader are also burned out. You're just not able to have those meaningful discussions. I'm curious, Shelly or Timothy.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in with a couple specific tactical ways that I think that companies could do more to create safety and inclusion. Number one, at the end of the day, a relationship with an employee in a company is a financial relationship. And so number one, pay people what they're worth and use data to know that you're making inclusive hiring practices and compensation decisions. Because I think that ultimately employees can feel paranoid, or they can feel that there's some favoritism, and oftentimes they're right. So number one, put your house in order. There's a lot of data. We've done a lot of work in the US on analyzing compensation trends. And we're talking about women in leadership today. There's still a gap in every sector on the pay gap between women and men. So pay women on par. This is Women's History Month, so pay women equally. Use resources and data that are available to make sure that you have benchmarks that you can look at in terms of not just evening the playing field between men and women, but also looking at equitable and inclusive compensation practices across the board. At X for Impact, we offer a free white paper on compensation trends, and we also have a software that has a salary calculator that have analyzed over 1 million records. But I think the other piece is that we want to look at who's in the room. And oftentimes it's easy to sort of do things the way that feels comfortable, just talking to, senior leaders or just talking to people like yourself. But look around the room. Actually, I think Timothy talked about inclusion and safety isn't just about skin tone. There are a lot of other pieces. Is everyone, in their 20s? Is everyone, talking about things because they're from the perspective of parents? And that could make those that are uncoupled or don't have a family feel, left out. Sort of, how do you look at who's in the room? Because we're human beings and we tend to go towards, the lunch table that has people that look like us and conversations that feel more comfortable. And then the other piece I would say is that employees will share with you their humanity if you ask. And there are little things you can do to make them feel appreciated and just recognized. And sometimes when it's an employee's birthday, we'll do things like even just changing our backgrounds for that day's call to match their favorite musician or artist or food. We had an employee that loved Celine Dion. You can appreciate that being Canadian. And so we all had our favorite Celine Dion album cover as our background. Those moments to just say, I hear you, I see you, I know what makes you special, I think are really important. And the last tactical element, I will say, going off of Eleanor's points about, and I think Paul also, about being vulnerable yourself as a leader and taking care of yourself. I think there's a certain amount of energy that you need to have, and confidence certainly, to be a leader. But there is a moment to say, this is who I really am. And I had a situation this week actually where someone from my personal life was really struggling with mental health issues and was having suicidal ideation and came to me. And I was really struck by this moment of power and powerlessness, because I was given this opportunity to save this person's life and I felt completely ill-equipped. I had never been in a situation like this. And so at our 4:00 stand-up meeting with our team, I really didn't hide that from my face. I said, I'm really struggling. If you have any resources, if any of you have been in this situation, I would love to know what to say, what to do. And they immediately jumped in, my co-founder and, my employees, to share resources. And as soon as I got off that call, I called the suicide prevention hotline and I dealt with this in real time and I shared this with the team. But I think those moments to say this is real life and we're all living in it are important to model.
This is very inspiring, because that level of transparency looks really nice on paper, but it puts you in an incredibly vulnerable place. I've been recently working as I'm part of a board that recently had to look at all the pay of all the employees, and we said, "Hey, I cannot gauge if you're paying them well or not. You have to explain me what is the salary of the industry, and also why you paid more or less than the industry. Because maybe the average is one thing, but you specifically pay that person more or less because of very specific. You have to write it down." And I remember they got worried, saying, "Hey, that might create some conflict." And my answer was, if you think that will create some conflict now, imagine in the future where our expectation of transparency is higher. And instead, what happened is just created a very beautiful discussion within the whole organization. And it's easier when you're a smaller team than when you're like hundreds. And then people got each other back, and they understood maybe a lot of very latent frustration. Timothy, I wanted to know, I have one last question. Did you want to add something in this one? What's your perspective on it?
Well, I think people, I agree with a lot of what was said. Of course, pay equity is first and foremost. If an organization is not paying women or other underrepresented groups the same as the men, forget everything else. Like, start there and fix that.
It's hard.
Obviously, I definitely agree with psychological safety. This is a big thing that maybe starts to get into the direction of being a little bit controversial, but in tech, but of course, I would say in every field, but I would say tech is obviously one of the more egregious with this. When you have a male-dominated and male and white and cisgendered and all the other ones that I'm not thinking of right now, these then you have a kind of a culture that is more likely to promote those people, that is more likely to make those people feel welcome, and to the detriment of the others. And so a lot of what we try to do and what I try to spend time on is to think of, how can we ensure that we're creating an environment that is actually welcoming and good for all of these diverse groups, and not just the dominant ones. And if we weren't focused on that day in, day out, we would have attrition from all these other groups. Even, lots of companies, they hire women and even if they're intending on, we got to, get to equal amounts or whatever, women tend to leave because the culture is not, welcoming over time. It's pretty tough. So anyway, just wanted to add that. Thank you.
No, thank you for that comment. It's true. You see that in organizations where it's not just you visually see more diversity of ideas, of background, of experiences, but suddenly nobody comes with this kind of huge head saying, I'm the absolute expert in this. Because IT is a beautiful example in social fields as well. Things are so complicated right now that not one person knows it all. You absolutely have to. You'll have the front-end engineer that has to talk with the back-end engineer, with the designer, with the this and the. Nobody knows for sure, everything around. You have to rely on other people who usually have a very different experience. I would like to. There's a very interesting question that was asked by Jennifer, and she talks about the imposter syndrome. It's real, and she says, I often find myself rewording my phrasing, readjusting my actions in fear of that it might, rock a boat. And so essentially, how do you go around the imposter syndrome that happens all the time? And again, on the practical side, because time is running quickly too, what are quick tips you can do saying, if you're in that position, and that will happen to everyone, what should you keep in mind?
I can jump in. It's a very complex and tough question. So first, I just want to acknowledge that imposter syndrome among women leaders is real. But among most people, actually, a lot of research at work show that mostly like 80% of people at work feel they have imposter syndrome. So, and I would say that imposter syndrome is the reminder that usually we are outside our comfort zone and pushing up against our next growth. So we have to determine if we are on the right path or not on a safe path to go out of our comfort zone. So first tips, I would say the first thing is to revisit your core values, your strengths, your skills, your talents. Sometimes we are stuck in this feeling we don't see our strengths, and we have to remember our value. If we lack confidence, I usually encourage people to spend time in two areas. First, remind yourself of why you do what you do, and second, remind yourself of the value you bring to the audience you serve. You bring something to the table. Like everybody brings something to the table. It's not because it's different that it's not valuable. And after thinking about your value, it's interesting also to look at the core belief and the reason why you feel that way. So those would be my tips. And I could just send, as a coach, like 3 questions. Which of your successes are you not taking ownership of right now? Which of your beliefs about success are holding you back? And which of your strengths are you overlooking currently?
Nice.
I would just add one quick soundbite on that is that what's helped me is my co-founder, Louis Salazar, has taught me this in tech and startup culture: progress over perfection. And so instead of sitting there for a day figuring out the right way to word the email, or continually sort of fretting over your slides, get it out there, because it's that sort of agile methodology. You'll learn, but time kills all deals. We know this, and you can get in your own head. So if you continue to work towards speed, you're going to learn through the process, and you'll realize that extra 2 hours thinking about the way you were going to phrase that actually didn't have any additional benefit. So for next time, you can build off of those learnings, and the ones that you may get feedback on or didn't land the way that you thought, you'll learn from that as well.
I always think of it like you're a lion. You're a lion. You're strong. You dominate the Sahara, but are you in the Sahara? If you find yourself in Antarctica, and you're supposed to hunt like a polar bear, ask yourself the question: is this where I need to be? What do I need to do to basically adapt to this environment? And it's important to be honest with oneself. Am I going to be happy if I basically adapt myself to this environment? Because there is quite a bit of effort that needs to be done. We all learn. We just need to identify if that learning is going to lead to something we as an outcome that we want. Sometimes it's about questioning where I am.
Fantastic. Tim?
I would just add fear of failure. I think dealing with imposter syndrome is a big thing, and it's probably tough to have one easy answer to it. But I think that if you can cultivate a culture within your organization where people are less afraid of failure, and also they feel that failure is about the team, not them individually, I think that can go a long way.
Fantastic. I have one trick that worked amazingly well for me when an employee comes and they're like, I'm not sure I can do this, or I'm not sure it's my right place. And often people switch fields. We do a lot of work integrated learning here at Greybox, and people will come from like drastically different fields and move to IT or marketing. And I like joking about it, not about the whole topic, but there's a nice way to bring that conversation, saying like, hey, you're still learning. Because if you were to do it right on the first try, you will put all of us into shame, because we've been working on that skill for years and we're still not there yet. So of course, it's a process. You'll learn your way through. So it's more about encouraging that learning process. And I think that relaxes people a great deal, saying, yeah, of course, I'm not going to nail it on the first time. It'll take a few tries. So look, there's some more questions we don't have time to address. I would really appreciate if Eleanor, Paul, Shelly, and Tim, you can also take a look and maybe add some insights into the chat. Usually those comments run even after the show. I would like to spend a bit of time just going through some of your recommendations, or basically things that you're up to and that you might invite our audience that is interested in that topic to learn more and dive deeper. I'll start with you, Timothy. Do you have something in mind?
Sure. Solutions for the women in leadership, I guess, issue.
Or
sure.
all that inclusivity talk, okay. Where usually your mind goes into when you need a bit of inspiration there.
I guess from the way I think about it is that it's a systemic issue. It's much bigger than any one of our organizations. I think that if we want to be on the right side of this, our organizations need to kind of take an activist approach. We can't just be thinking that, okay, we'll just be even-handed, and then it'll be fine. I mean, if we were to be even-handed, we would end up with 85% men, so I think the controversy comes in what are those actions then that you're going to take, because we're having to take this activist role. So I think, we need to be part of the entire big picture of trying to push in that direction together, lobbying and whatever it is. And then also clean your own house, of course. So pay equity, all those other things, deal with workplace harassment. Like all of these things should be like things that you want to do rather than that you're like a barrier to, which is too often the case in most organizations. And I would just leave one data point to kind of show to me how there's so many statistics you can use about how things need to change. But the one that really speaks to me is in 2021, only 2% of venture capital in the United States went to women founders. 2%. It went down from 2020. There's a long way to go, and we really need to fix this. I mean, it's horrible.
Well, thanks, Timothy. It's a very good point. You, in some ways, looking forward is one thing, but look back into your own, clean your own house. It's a good way to get started by actually starting. Paul, do you want to go next?
I mean, you're right about clean your own house. Like, create the right culture in your organization. There's biases out there. They're always going to be there. It's funny that you say 2% of VC money goes to women-led organizations, and it's that bias you can't eliminate overnight. It's unfortunate. We can communicate it, but yeah, it's like try to create the right culture within your organization. Make sure that there are some best practices that you could basically maybe even talk about to others and suggest to others. That's what we try to do in our organization, and make sure that things change gradually. That's
fantastic. Thank you, Paul. And Shelly, I think you have a very concrete tool in mind to get started there.
Yes, we were talking about using data to benchmark and to know what pay equity might look like. And X for Impact, we've created a comprehensive tool, and it's available on x4i.org. You can go to the homepage and find it, or you can use the shortened URL there. And I'd love to just make a special offer so that we can help you jumpstart your equitable pay journey. So today we're all new friends, so we'll use friend 25. You can get 25% off. It's less than $400 for the whole year for unlimited use. You can look up salaries for yourself for different roles. We have over 150 different titles, 550,000 real nonprofit organizations that have reported these salaries, and you can see who you're benchmarking against. And the second thing I would say is put your money where your mouth is. Obviously, we want you to be hiring women and looking for opportunities for women to go into leadership roles, pay them equitably. But the other thing is think about other ways that your company can support women in leadership. What about your vendors? We have a free tool on X for Impact in our tech directory where you can actually find tech solutions that have one or more women in the C-suite. So the next time you're looking for an HR software or a tool for your CRM, why not consider thinking about your opportunity to spend money with that company based on how they live their values? And there's opportunity to do so. We have about, I think, 47% of the tech solutions listed in our directory have at least one woman in the C-suite. And definitely do it in an authentic way. I had someone reach out to me from a cybersecurity firm and asked me to be on their board. And the first thing I did was go to their website and to look at their leadership team. And every single person on their leadership team and board was a man. And I love men. I'm married to a man. I am raising a son, but that's just not acceptable. And to reach out to me as an unknown person to find a token woman to put on your board is not the way to have women in leadership. So do the work, be authentic, and know that there are plenty of us out here, and we are happy to share, tactics for success.
Well, I absolutely agree. There's a ton of data. Shelly is underselling it massively. There's so much nice resources on that website. And we talked a lot about transparency here. if people say, hey, why are we doing this? You now have a fantastic tool to say, we're based on this information. This is so much bigger than us, and thank you for sharing it again. And ultimately, Eleonore, what about you?
There's a lot of things that has been mentioned. I would talk more to women leaders that are trying to change things among their organization. I would mention that inclusivity is a shared responsibility. And it's important to surround yourself by mentor, coach, ally, and also to know when it's time. You don't have to support everything on your shoulders to change an organizational culture. Sometimes there's just a need to recognize that there's not a fit. If you want to live according to your value, and you should go fight somewhere else. Also, because it's something I often see among inclusive leaders that are like doing a battle alone, and it's heavy sometimes. So just surround yourself.
Yeah, it's full of wisdom. I love that. It goes so quickly. I think we shared. I want to thank you, everyone. You shared a lot of fantastic resources to look more about what you do, but also look more about what your organization, what other organizations are doing, what kind of structure, what kind of framework you can use, and also just get that conversation started. I appreciate Eleonore, your wisdom there on you. It's not a battle you have to do by yourself, because let's be real, you'll probably burn out if you're trying to carry everything. But if there's opening in that organization, nobody knows by heart, we all have biases. There's no way around it. But by talking about it, we can get rolling on a very interesting discussion that will lead to us to very interesting places for us as an organization, and also as our impact, not just within the organization, but outside the organization. So look, I've been horrible. I think we listed 25 questions, and we went through 3 plus 2 audience questions. This is how poorly we've done going through that list, but the quality was. I really like those talk. So I would like to thank you one last time. If people have any questions, feel free to use the chat. We'll still be around, and we can answer them on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever platform of your choice. And see you for the next monthly episodes. Thank you again, Tim. Thank you, Eleonore. Thank you, Shelly and Paul. So essentially, our next episodes, we have a few topics in mind. If you have suggestions, feel free. We'll talk about transparency in an organization. So not just the day when you do your report, but across the year. We'll talk about tech trends that are immediate in the next 3 years, tech trends into the social sector that are in the next 10 years. We'll have a few other topics that right now are skipping my mind, but basically everything about social impact and how we can hold ourselves to higher standards as leaders within that field. So that's it. See you next month.